Hello and welcome to today's lesson where we will be discussing what constitutes a crime. Now this is a really key part of criminal legal theory because today we're going to explore the formulation of an offence. Now as always, it is so important to get to grips with the fundamentals so we can then build on our knowledge to tackle more complex legal principles. So let us now begin. Now, this is where criminal legal theory starts to get quite technical because we're going to be formulating a crime and we're going to be unpacking that together by breaking down the elements of a criminal offence. Now, here we have the actus reus and the mens rea. Let's begin now with the actus reus. Now this is the guilty action, okay? This is unlawful conduct, criminal conduct. It could be something like selling drugs, it could be assault, it could be stealing something, right? But it could also be the result of the defendant's actions. So that could be something like manslaughter, where the defendant didn't necessarily mean to kill the victim, however, their actions caused the results, okay? And up here, we also have a concept of commission versus omission. Now, a crime of omission is something that we came across in the Crown and Miller. In that situation, we had a homeless person in a squat accidentally setting fire to the squat. Nobody was hurt. However, he had created a dangerous situation. Yes, he didn't have the necessary mens rea for arson. However, this situation that he created warranted some liability. So his inability to put out the fire, his lack of commission of doing that, resulted in a crime of omission, right? So that is the Miller principle of creating a dangerous situation. So these things can get quite confusing. So it's important to really get to grips with that before we move on. Now, mens rea, this is known as the guilty mind, okay? This is the fault element, what we call the mental requirement for a crime. Now, this can be done directly with knowledge, purpose. Those of you who enjoy criminal procedural shows will probably have heard of things like motive, right? Now, you can also be reckless in your commission of an offence, okay? This is something we call oblique intention. And it's like this. So, was the result a virtual certainty of the defendant's actions? And was that something that the defendant could have reasonably foreseen? Yeah? These are all things that are taken into account. Right. So, for crimes of specific intent, both of these elements have to be present for the prosecution to secure a conviction. Now, it is worth mentioning here that it is the prosecution who bear the burden of proof. Now, this means that they are responsible for bringing the case, right? They represent the Crown, and they have to satisfy the judge or the jury, depending on where they are, to a certain standard of proof. Now, the standard of proof is that the prosecution has proved so that you can be sure, beyond all reasonable doubt, that it was the defendant who committed the offence with which they are indicted or they have been charged. So this is all relevant for crimes of specific intent, but for crimes of basic intent, so that's something like possession of a firearm, you do not actually require the mental element, okay? The unlawful act itself of having a firearm in your possession, for example, is enough for the prosecution to secure a conviction against you, okay? So let's take this theory now and apply it to some law. So here we have an extract from the Theft Act 1968, and it is as follows. A person is guilty of theft if he dishonestly appropriates property belonging to another with the intention of permanently depriving the other of it. Okay? let's unpack that for a moment, okay? So here I've separated the yellow I've identified as our actus reus elements. The red I've identified as our mens rea elements, okay? So these are the different things that the prosecution must prove to get a conviction under the Theft Act, okay? Number one, appropriation, okay? So there has to be the taking of something or the removal of something. Number two, property, okay? So it must be something tangible. It could be an iPhone, it could be a set of car keys, it could be a computer, but it's crucial that it's something tangible and it's not something intangible like an idea, okay? The final actus reus element is this property belonging to another person, okay? So it's not property that in any arguable way belongs to the accused. Yeah, so an example of that could be, let's say a girlfriend and boyfriend bought a chair together, they split up, boyfriend takes chair, girlfriend accuses him of theft, however, he also paid for half of the chair. So arguably he's got some ownership of that property, so it would be difficult to secure a conviction. Can you see the difference there? Anyway, moving on now to the mens rea element. Now, this is always the most important part of any case, okay? Because most of the time, prosecution can prove conduct. It always usually comes down to the mental element, the fault element, okay? So under the Theft Act, we've got this idea of dishonesty. This has been really hotly debated in criminal law, but at the moment it stands as both an objective and subjective test. So was the defendant acting dishonestly by his own analysis? And would a reasonable person deem his actions to be dishonest? Okay? And the final one, very important, an intention to permanently deprive. Yeah, this goes further than borrowing. So for example, if you're at university, you put your friend's jotter in your bag by accident, you're not guilty of theft because the following day when you return it, you had no intention to permanently deprive her of it. You see, it's very important that you understand these nuanced points and principles. Right. Now we've got our law, let's apply it. Okay, here are the facts of our case that we're going to be discussing together today. Let's meet Alice. She is 33 years old. She is a full-time mum and she's been struggling with her bills this month. She goes to her local shop Best Buy. She purchases a loaf of bread and a chocolate bar. As she leaves, her bag rips, revealing nappies and talcum powder, which had not been paid for. The security guard immediately calls the police and refuses to talk to Alice per the company policy. She is arrested on suspicion of shoplifting and taken to the police station for further questioning. Now, you have been called to go and represent Alice, so you take her through the offence and advise her. She's incredibly distraught and she can't comprehend her situation. So you take her through the formulation of the offence. Again, this is going to help Alice understand her position. So let's apply some of the law we have just learned to the facts that we have. Number one, appropriation. Yep, so Alice putting the items in her bag and attempting to leave. Unless she's got receipts proving that it's from another shop, I think the prosecution would probably not have a difficult job of getting that one. So property, that's nappies, talcum powder. Again, unless we've got evidence otherwise, I don't think the prosecution would struggle to prove that. Belonging to another, this is where probably CCTV could become important, because Best Buy might not have actually owned those items. Now, dishonesty and intention to permanently deprive, very important here. If Alice had simply forgot to pay, you know, and she couldn't explain that to security guard, these are all key points. If Alice perhaps was just planning to pay the next day and just simply didn't have enough that day and assumed that that would be okay, I mean, it's still not exactly an intention to permanently deprive. So, you know, these are all key things that would, you know, come into play when you're representing Alice. And I think it's important to start thinking about these things so that when you find yourself helping the Alices of the world, that you're fully equipped and understand the basics of how an offence is formed.